يكايا ستيني تلتكت يوان كل تشيش وشين خستي ياجي خستين كا كتخنقات كشقي أتوي an kas an kadan awe adadawe yutakhotang akhu has to tund tani yeti kitcha nagat awe gwash yisatin guchsa we katki kaye yeti atlain goon kutzeti kaw gwashwan kanins we yiksa ginki ka suyach yeti dudugu Tashingit kusi ko ye awe chakut kusti dachawe Ḳuwdlig, tlektihin qoa at khus at what's that do us God at khusakhuti at goshiwi basi do us English khinach ye awe Minnesota khawutin qa awe nakide wutu qukh chakudani de akhu awe shakatkhu alqa dakihiti klein as outleyech ye awe akayati Gwash Grand Lake Casino you do a sock. Konachoe a kade owe kitchanaga. Ya asatu koa we at was kuchu. At was kuchu ka. Ya you atunach you ʼatudli.átk atu de awe you chewatan. Gwashizitin u kitchanagat. Gwashlachei tlaya it GAT gwashlakai a cook ki good. Ja, bas ko a dakak wakuch, das a yak idlak, just way bas a ya nakak wakuch. Kasle shuko at owe waga. Gul cheese yuch satini, gul shukwa a yitwasuku, shingit chenach yuch a yit atki, kek wake, aka awe wuchin yitchakachtune. Yitwagasugu yuch yitani. Chadasada. Okay, yata gwash kakak ginig. Daat sa yuchagachtila'a. That's the way English ade kakananik. Daat sa yuchagachtila'a. Daat sa yuchagachtila'a. Kaskia tadechatna. Daat sa yuchagachtila'a. Yisikuge daat sa.
That's which one, right?
Aqasa.
What are we going to talk about?
Yeah, away. What are we going to talk about? Daat sa is one of my favorite things because it means what about. I used to say dasa daat, and some say it's daat sa. Okay, because, well, here's jumping in the Wayback Machine. A lot of us know dasa. Yuksha. How would we translate dasa?
What?
Right, so this is, what are we going to talk about? So dasa. But if you put something in between da and sa, a little t is going to pop up. So you could say daat ya nach sa. You could say that. Anybody got a prediction for this one?
Through what?
Well, it's got the nach on there. But here's the context where I first heard something like this. Daat yanach sawe ʼatudli.átk ʼatángi, which is a question, but you're not really supposed to answer it. Tlingit has those sometimes, like riddles, I guess you'd call them.
What is stronger than our language?
Not stronger. When you say ʼatudli.átk, it's different than tlitziin. Yes. What is more
Precious.
than our language? So daat yanach would be what is more than. And you say daat qinsawe, what is less than. But that's just showing that if you put something in between these, this letter T pops up. And that's where you say da, dot, sa, which causes the T to pop. Dot, dot, sa. About what? So in the syllabus, we saw these phrases. For reminding us about that, reminding me about that.
Yeah.
So here's one from Ḳaalḳáawu. Would anybody like to read this passage? Will somebody read?
The chunky young jint has uashi Yádi. You want me to keep going? Has yaga achit has ʼatudli has Ḥuwdlig Xóotsx X tula.áat has gutu.ádi kawdliyeeji has Ḥuwdlig.
Sheesh. And we had someone in the room start reading at the exact same time. So I'll say, would you like to also read? No? Okay. Sheesh. So if we went just sort of one line at a time, and we can just sort of say, what kinds of things do you recognize? And then what kinds of things do you know? Hadachhankiyan achjint has uashi Yádi. Yeah, our grandchildren.
And the young is what shows that it's talking about plural, right?
Yes, there are most kinship terms pluralize with, sorry, I'm trying to talk and type the same. Most kinship terms pluralize with a high tone hus. So you'd say, what's one that pluralizes with hus? Āxliilku has. Right, āish has, āat has, āxani has. Which ones pluralize with yan? Āxtani yan. Āxtachanki yan.
I've heard, I don't know what you say, but it's for
Āxunt. Yan. Some of them get that little plural marker, right? Chunki, the chunki. Achkani yan, achlilko has. So our grandchildren, what'd they do? They did something.
They led me here by the hand, Gib.
And you don't see it this way too often. Like if you say achjint has uashi, on its own, that is literally, they touched my hand or my arm. But then when he said Yádi, it's like, oh, it's like they went like this and brought me. Has yaqa achit, hashilko has shkalniki. I'll probably put a high tone on here. Any parts we recognize.
Their grandparents were telling stories.
Maybe
Are
not.
telling stories. The grandparents' stories.
Yes. What's the dot, dot, dot? Hasyaqa.
They'll write it, and our grandparents tell stories for the writing.
I bet you there's no Y on there. I might have made a little mistake. It's not writing. That would be.
Heard, to hear.
I came up with carried.
Oh, interesting. There is an ach for carry. So this is, and we're going to talk, we've got all semester, all next semester to talk this stuff through. There are verbs that are going to go through changes. Okay, so for example, if we just look at the verb database, which I'm looking for. So if we go up to ach, so there is an ach to carry things, and there's an ach to listen. So I do think it's this one. And as we go through, we might recognize this version, awa ach, they heard it. And then we can learn how to change that. Like, so if you hear awa ach, I want you to get to a point where you say, oh, now I could say for anybody. ษ์a'ch, ʼayaa ach, gutu.áach, ʼyi ach, ḥasawa ach, and gutu.áach. And so you shouldn't need this list of things, but really you should only need this. It tells you everything that you need to know about that verb, but we will be working on like getting that sort of set of codes into our mind and then trying to naturally use it. It goes unnatural to natural. That's the mission. So you can also say tlechwa'ach. So note here, this has two A's. This only has one. This is short and high. This is long and low. And then we can say kuka'ach, and we can see these with, here it is in the future, negative future. Again, I want to get us to a point where we don't need this. We will be able to put those forms together on our own, which will take time, and we have time. This right here is a hortative. Let it happen, right? So like the John, Paul, George, Ringo, Yasyawa, Yinqati. But I don't know how it was being. Is it existing? I'll just say Yinqati for let it be. But for this, you say aqa'ach. Let them hear it. So once you learn how to put together a hortative, which you will learn how to do, it has the conjugation prefix and this thing called the qa mode. It will always have qa in there. That's why you say ʼatudli.átk. That's a hortative. But you could throw a letter T on the end as a suffix. If it ends with a consonant, you will add it, and that gets you the verb mode so it could happen. So you could say ḥasaqa āchit. They came here so they could hear it. And so if you could say ʼnaxtu'áat, you could say Xóotsx X ʼatudli ʻnaxtu'áatit. I put my shoes on so we could go. We get out of here. But you will learn how to do all of this stuff. You'll learn how to spot it. You'll learn how to predict what that verb is, and you're going to learn how to put that verb together, because those things are useful. And when you learn that little thing, it's called purposive. Doesn't matter what it's called. It's the so it could happen mode. The hortative is a let it happen mode. They are related, not by meaning, but by patterns. All we care about, I think, is the patterns. We want to learn how to build these patterns. our grandchildren, they led me here by the hand so they could hear the stories of their grandparents.
Does the IT always go with hortative only?
Yes, yeah. And sometimes it's just the letter T. So once you learn how to put a hortative together, you can put this one together. It's one of the simplest additions. You add that letter T, which is sometimes an IT on there. Okay. Qatucha, let's eat. That's another hortative. Qatucha. ʼatudli.átk. We came here so we could eat it, whatever the thing is. It's probably an ostrich egg. Huh? Okay, then he says, Gunashchish. How do we translate that?
Thank you.
Thank you. Then he says, ʼatudli.átk.
I guess they are my strength.
They are my, a little bit different.
Strength.
That would be ʼatudli.átk. But now we have ʼtuwdlig. They are my,
They are the strength of my insides.
they are my courage. Such a nice thing to say. Because I was one of the ones that led him there by the hand. So, I have to listen to this one again. We might, the yeah part is interesting to me. Maybe it's right. I think it's okay. Let's just take it as it is.
They want.
Yeah, so if we took that part off, like if we just sort of ignored that for a second, oops, like let's actually grab all of this. So we just sort of they want it. And if we say that does change it a little bit. Any predictions on what that is, why it's what it does?
Almost gives it like a place or they want it there. The place, okay, the place they want.
Our way of life.
Our way of life.
ʼadáin
Did they
Know
know
it
it well?
well.
That they
They've
know
learned it well.
And who's Ḳaalḳáawu? Cyril Joe. This is the very beginning. I think it's the Aqtatin story. I can't. He always started a story with this wonderful. He always had these wonderful bookends. Like he would just talk through something and then bam, right into the story.
Lance,
Ah,
how come it isn't hastu tua segu ʻawas ʻasikūye?
the place where they know it. So yeah.
I don't see the no there.
Oh, it's ʻausaku.
No, I mean 2 lines up.
Oh, the place they. There you go. Ḥuwdlig.
Ah,
I was jumping ahead. Okay. Any thoughts or questions about that?
The IT really messed me up. Made me think it was talking about writing something.
Yeah. Well, so you could say kuhida.
The now I know.
Aushashat.
Now I
They
know.
grab the pencil, and then going back to our, there it is. So we go down to heat. Fast moving text, sorry. And it depends if you want to write it or if you just want to write. They grabbed a pencil so they could write. So here we're going to go look for the hortative. Ḳaqaxhit.
It doesn't help that I transcribed it wrong, didn't even.
Kuhida aushashat. Ḳaqaxhitit. They grabbed a pencil so they could write. Now this is an advanced thing. It is. And so sometimes we're going to look, as we look at these sentences, we find things that I think are, usually it's the content, the message, the things that are there. Because he was someone who spoke with an incredible amount of love for people.
I remember trying to learn to write the natives, like don't be wolves. Isn't it from ʼatuk'ádi that you start with that?
The prohibitive?
No, prohibitive.
Yeah, usually you start from either the imperfective and you do a negative imperfective. Like you could say, icha, you're eating it. Shish ichak, don't eat it. And then other times, I haven't quite figured this one out. You do a negative repetitive version. So for example, they regularly drive. It would be you regularly drive. You iquk. You iquk. There's a K at the end. So then when we were doing these picture things, there was one of a red light and Marge laughed and she said, shish you iquk. You're not going anywhere. And so the prohibitives are, there's a shish at the beginning and an underlined K at the end. They're often, I think they're negative imperfectives. If it doesn't have an imperfective, then it's a negative repetitive mode, which they get a little complicated. Yeah. Okay. We'll do one more next class. We'll do them one class at a time. Let it soak in. Does anybody have any language questions you've been thinking about?
I have one. When you use that ʼagax to say, let him write it, how come there wasn't ʼagax it?
Yeah, so the question might have two, so there's two things I think about when you ask that question. One is this is one of those verbs where there is this version which has an object to write it, like you're going to write this sentence, you're going to write this story, you're going to draw this picture. So there's some specified thing that you're working on. But if you want to say, I'm just going to write, I'm just going to draw, and there's no object, then it's going to be this one. So there's a set of verbs where the object goes away, but now the verb has to go to this plus D version, right? And so this is one of the ones that does that. So if there is a hortative for this one, so you could say, ʼakaxhit, let them write it. So that it's a poem, it's a story, it's a picture, it's a specific thing that they are writing. And this one, you could say, ʼakaxhitit. And so you might say, ʼkashtagenach ʼachwatan, ʼakaxhitit. They spoke slowly so they could write it down.
So you change it to ʼidit?
Well, this one, yes, there you go, X, high tone I, D-I-T. Because what happens here, yeah, it's a similar set of rules that we've seen, like when we learned the relational suffix, which we can review. So like the relational suffix, if you had like keet, right, which is a difficult thing. Well, let's just do hit. That's maybe easier to show a relational for. So then if you make this into my house, how are we going to write the tlingit in here? Ach,
Hiddi.
right? So what happens here is you have a T, you're going to add a suffix, but there's a set of consonants that have a voiced version. So T goes to D. What are some other ones that change when you put a suffix on there?
G goes to J.
Is that with a double vowel sound like?
Okay, I'm looking at consonants only. J goes to G. What about underline K?
Underline G.
Underline G. What about a CH?
Let's do a J, doesn't it?
To a J, TL to a DL, TS,
DZ.
I think that's all of them. So any words that end with this, even in a vowel, if you put a constant, if you put a, or even in a verb, sorry, if you put a vowel at the end of it, it's going to cause that to happen. And so here we had ʻaxha hit. Is that it? ʻaxha hit. ʻaxha hit. So this would be let them write it. So if we take this exact form and we put IT after it, we have now added a vowel, so this needs to change that to a D. ʻaxha hit, so they could write it. Now, if you haven't seen anything like this before, don't worry. There's a plan where we're going to look at perfectives. We're going to look at negative perfectives, futures, negative futures. Then we're going to start going through some of the more complicated ones. And this is one of the complicated ones. But once you learn how to do it, it's fun because you can do it all the time. And when you listen to speakers and you listen to stories, you're like, oh yeah, there's one of those things with the T in the end. The so it could happen thing. Then you could put things together like hat, qua, gut, ka, tuk. How am I going to say that? I think it'd be this. This one's going to be hard. I think it's maybe, I don't know if it's high or low. Did I say it right? I bet you it's like that. Anybody know what I'm trying to say?
You sure it has to do with walking around?
I came here.
To kick his butt.
To kick your butt.
To kick people's butts. Okay. Anyone else got a question? Things you've been thinking about? Wondering about?
No. I was wondering when you use one qanins versus when you use ʼatudli.átk.
Usually if you're from the coast, you'll say one qanins, and if you're from the inland, you'll say ʼayaa. That's been my experience, but you'll actually say my. That's my experience, but Waiati is not used a whole lot on the coast, I think. Wanqanians is not used a whole lot in the interior. But y'all can use both too. Be fun. No one will know where you're from. Like what? Anything else? Anybody want to share any sentences about random assortment of animals?
ʼatudli.átk. Da. Da duga. Ďakyeti. Da du ʼlidi. Kawdliyeeji. ʼatudli.átk. ʼagax. Ḳuwdlig. Nusk du flu. Et gagut. Kushta. We hashaka. क़ādā. Kushta kwani Ḥuwdlig. Yádi. Ta. Away. Ḥuwdlig. Du see. Ḥuwdlig. Ḥuwdlig. Du see. Kushta kwani Ḥuwdlig. Yacht. Shaawát. Yacht. Duga. Kawdliyeeji. Wooch. Wooch. Duga. Ḳaalḥáawu. Tlas. Llwxian duga. ʼayaa. Sigedi. We Xóotsx. Sigedi duga. Xóotsx. Ḥuwdlig. Du Ḥaalḵáawu. Kunnach. Ḳuwdliyeeji. Shan. Sask. We hashaka. Ḳādā. Saski. Ḥuwdlig. Away. ʼatudliyeeji. Kata. We task. Gopher. Āyaa. Kas. Sock. We we sak do sak ka do wakdanayi. Snoopy and the Red Baron Yachyati ʼayaa. Kutsin Tleitka Kainach Mickey Yuduasak Kagak Tleitka Kainach Mini Yuduasak Sin Chak we she Captain Antonil Kaidach Muskrat Love Yuduasak float like the heavens above. Looks like muskrat love. Diki Yachyati with lihash. Sin at Sachan Uwa Ya. Gach Weigach Pleidka Kainach Bugs Yuduasak Wooch
Hey, can you hear me? Hello?
Satuach.
I have one.
Cook.
Can you hear me?
All
right, sweet. I've done two of them. So Nukshayan Ushyachati Nukshayan Yahaye Yachati Ya Tlachyachati Gach Ya Ayak Unk. And that's as far as I got.
Okay, good cheese.
Prestige.
Took Johan.
Ďakujem. Screen share again. Da'awe Wooch kin Ḳuwdlig.
Unach usk.
Right. Well, technical difficulties. Jeez. Because my screen sharing is paused. That's a new one.
It happened to someone else the other day.
That was me yesterday. It was should see. It worked again.
No, stand by. Getting closer.
Okay. Kashuk at kahil achich ati. The electric thing is giving me trouble. On the regular.
Isatinge. It's killing me. Sorry. All right. I think I got it this time. Okay, I'm not going to touch anything. Da kutan sagwat yach yati ʼaqáawu. Nukshiyan nich achan kudati. I'm not sure if that one's right, but if we wanted to work on it, I'm open to any ideas.
You could say nich kach yedna teach. But it depends. Well, I guess live. Depends if we're talking about like where they sleep or where you always find them. Or...
Something like this.
Okay.
So maybe same thing here. Askatu achan kudzati.
Yeah, askatu yik. And then again, yeah, you could say yena teach or yeyati, or you could say ḳuwdlig if you want to say like that's where they're like make a home kind of a thing. Yena teach is a pretty good one. They're always there.
Kushta'awe kuch yanach kudlige.
Dasa ʼaxewu.
Peshwasaku. Wooch gnaschish.
Everyone else? It's okay. Wooch again.
ʻataya.
Oh.
I had one that I had a question on. So nukshi yarch kin chayach has kuna h. As a thing to form it myself, I came up with ʼu'uich, which, as I'm saying, it probably explains to me why it doesn't do that.
No H.
Because like they regularly live in the water.
Yeah.
And when I looked it up on the sheet, it said kuna h.
Yes, it is kuna H, but it could be kuna wage. It should go to wage, but it usually doesn't because I think people are too uncomfortable with it nowadays. But if you get speakers who talk like the old people, they would probably say kuna wage. But if you said ku, that would mean like literally its home, like the place where it sleeps especially is going to be in that spot.
Okay.
So that's why like we say, and if you want to say like, especially when we get into these furry mammals that live on the water, ḥīnxhqa yedna teach, things it's always on the surface of the water. You could say things like that. And so as we like learn more Tlingit, we'll learn how to get more and more specific with things and then what those verbs might be sort of communicating. So for when you say like ķuwdlig, it means like you sort of have your own land, you have your own living space in that area, is usually what it's sort of talking about.
See, I'll just do a couple of my other ones, and I'm also welcome feedback. Let's see. Ingedi as has Wooch. Attempting to say beavers not on trees.
Oh. Okay.
Ḳaalḵáawu duchaw has was attacked. Achtushe dutua Wooch ʼatángi. I feel like maybe there was some Lingi algebra there that I missed because Wooch just seems awkward.
Yeah.
What I was trying to say is my cat always wants to eat mice.
Gutu.ádi. Yeah, you could say gutu.ádi. And you could say gutu.ádi. Most people would probably say ʻagux in that case, but you could say ʻagux as well. Kutin.
So where would that originate from?
Tuwusagu. And well, so when we get into these repetitives, I would also probably say kutin awachai. That way it sounds a little bit more like a verb, just because kutin atchai is usually what people say for cheese.
Yeah.
So if we look up something like sagu, so we're going up to gu, and a lot of us know this. Achtuasagu, ituasagu, dutuasagu. Like in beginning Tlingit, we learned how to do that and how to change the ach, it, du. Hatuasagu, yituasagu, hastituasagu, hatuasagu. Right, so we learn how to do that, and now we want to learn how to change this thing around. So here's tuwusagu, to want something, or tuwasagu, to want it or to like it. So here we have all of those, ach tuwasagu, so we see we're ach du ha yi hastu and ka. That should be a low tone ka right there. And we can see like this is a relational pronoun, because we could say achla, itla, dutla, hatla, yitla, hastutla, katla. And then we see this is actually a different verb, technically, when it goes to ushku. And that's to dislike or to not want it. And then we go down, we see the rule that we're sort of talking about with both this ʻqunawech verb and then also this one, which would be gwech, is when you have a verb that ends with a double O, so it's open. If you close it, it likes to go to W-E-I. It's just something that happens. That's why you say, ausaku, they know it, ya anasquain. They're getting to know it because you closed it with the letter N. That caused it to go to Wayne, right? And just like we know the word quena. What is quena? Usually we'll say like chiquena or chiquena, kaquena, tuquena.
The thing that you wipe it with.
Yeah, the wiping thing. So what's the verb for wiping? Anybody know?
Like.
What is it?
Or you could say wipe it, right? And so again, ya anasquain, they are wiping it right now.
Can you repeat which types of verbs like to do this one first?
Yes. Okay, any verb. Okay, let me write it down on. I've kind of forgot the past few classes to put our notes up. So like I take notes like right here. And then I put those notes up for our class. So it's a PDF file so you can You could write along with me if you want to, but don't feel like you have to write it all down because you can get it later. So any verb root that's, whether there's a consonant or not, it doesn't matter. But if it ends with an AA, if that's how it ends, like you say, ye yawa ka, right? So what is ye yawa ka? How do we translate that? Anybody know?
They said.
They said.
They said it. They said this specific thing, yes. So, if you said they say it regularly, you would say you. I can't remember if yay or you goes first. I think yay, you. I'm going to say yay, you. Yay, you. And then you'd say, yeah, cake. I guess. I think it's high tone. So if you have something that ends with an AA, ka, ka, like you say, awa, ka, they sewed it. But you would say, aqis, they are sewing it right now. So anything with an AA is going to go to an EI if you close it. This is just something that happens with verbs. If it ends with this ah sound and you put something on there, you're going to get an A sound out of it. So if you're looking up a verb and you're saying, I don't see this EI, I don't see a case as a verb root. Well, it might be ka, which it is in this case. The other one is you might have a consonant on there, you might not. If it ends with a double O, that's when you're going to get WEI. If you close it, right? And so we just went through some, they'll say, Keet cha yawa gu. Everybody know that one? Keet cha yawa gu. Pod of killer whales. Swam. Podding. They pod swam. They swam together. But then you would say, Keet cha ya yana Gwain, just like in the song. They are swimming now, right? So this is something that does happen. And so when you come back to this, this is triggered by a couple, as for some of us, we're in this mode where we're trying to figure out how to do the repetitive type of stuff. Because if you want something regularly, let's go through a bunch. So in this case, you get sagooch, ke-sagooch. But I bet you a long time ago, people would say, gutu.ádi ke-sagooch. They want it regularly. And if you wanted to do all the time, you would have gutu.ádi gascooch. But I think people would have said, and maybe there's some that sort of resist it. That does happen sometimes. They say, no, I don't care, I don't change. But there was an old speaker in Yakutat who would say, ʼatuwa gascooch. So they would say things like that. And it would do this way thing that we expect it to do, but this is one of those, another one of those sort of advanced rules. Okay.
What would he say?
They'd say ʼatuwa gascooch. Like you could say, I could say, ʼatqishi ʼatuwa gascooch. I always want dry fish. That is a true statement, just in case you're wondering. Just saying, I'm just saying. All right, finish cheese. If you folks want to share more and have more questions for next week, but I feel like what we need to do before we do anything else, I think we should make a list of 10 birds. How about Yádi? How about Ťák?
I have a list that's over 300 birds in Gmail.
Oh, really? Okay, we're not going to do 300, but you can certainly give us some.
Oh, I had trouble last year just getting 40. I can't imagine 300.
Any other birds that, what do you think we're going to do with these birds over the weekend?
You said birds and I heard verbs and I was like, oh, okay,
I
well,
heard
yeah,
verbs
yeah,
too.
yeah, that makes sense.
Verbs.
I'm not familiar with the verb talk, but
Birds.
I heard verb too, so
Okay, there
must be something with the internet.
They're verby birds. Okay.
Bird is the word.
Verb is the bird is the bird is the verb. Okay.
is the word.
Kuye.
Kuye.
I literally have a list on the back of this. That's my favorite names.
Oh, really? Is that the
Hinta. Oh, that's the camp robber? Yeah, Kuye. I think it's got an X on the end, yeah.
Kuye?
Yeah.
What is it? Gindada. Wood, rather.
The Gikia.
Wooch.
Oh, so the coasties have an advantage here, and the inlanders have an advantage here.
Jacko.
Say what one again? Is that one word?
No.
Like that? It's a what? Flycatch. Okay.
Un.
Wooch. One.
Okay, that's it. That's 10. We are going to write a sentence about each of these birds. That's your mission over the weekend. Just write to your comfort level for some of them, and for a couple of them, maybe try something a little new, right? And as far as like when you're asked to write sentences, when you're asked to produce stuff, we have lots and lots of resources available to us. So I just want to make sure that we don't feel isolated and alone. And even if it's just like, write 10 if you can. And we'll share them next week. And what I would like us to do is start putting them onto this sheet that, let's see, where is it at? Somewhere I have a so this is our sentences. So I could take this wonderful list of birds and I could put it right here. Ťák kuyeech gandata gugu, dekitgiya kindachunet ishk waqt dandash tray in qukt. Gushuk again? Oh, coon. There. And so if you haven't done this yet, there's a little arrow right here. So find the one that says student name. Then you click on this little downward arrow and you say duplicate. Then you'll type your name here. And now you can write big, beautiful sentences right here. If you have any questions about your sentences, you can write them right here. If I have notes about your sentences, I'll probably write it right there. This is, everything we do in this class is an exercise. It's a chance to practice something. It's a chance to try something out. You're not being judged on anything. You're also not being graded on anything. You just do the thing, and then awesome. And we'll talk about it. And I'll look at this stuff and listen to what you're saying, and sometimes tailor some of our lessons towards helping with some adjustments that might help you in terms of speaking and putting things together. As you put sentences together, and as we interpret Tlingit, when we start looking at stories and stuff, which we'll do a little bit right now, I just want you to make sure that you're asking questions of things that you're thinking about, so we can keep connecting the dots. Getting to knowing what Tlingit is, and then being able to speak and understand it is a big, long journey, but it's not something you ever have to do alone. So there's lots of resources there. You can look at the verb dictionary, you can look at the Tlingit dictionary, you can look at the verb database, and just say like one thing about these different, we're doing birds, we did some animals, maybe we'll do some water things. It's just a chance for us to engage in the language on our own. But make sure, even though if you didn't get a chance to share, and maybe you only got a couple of them done, try to get to 10. Because if you don't do the exercises, it's really easy to just sort of like coast through and just ride the waves, and you gotta paddle the boat a little bit as well. Okay.
So just real quickly to clarify, if we've already copied over the sheet, or if we've already duplicated that sheet and named it, then we should probably just copy the new words and add it.
Yeah,
rather than a new page.
So I can add, here's from the student name one, I can copy it from here. I could go to René, and I can add them right there. And then and I could say ʼatlain, ʼatnasi, ʼayaa, ʼatudli.átk, ʼatlain ʼatnasi, ʼayaa, ʼatudli.átk. What did I just write? Yeah, because I have a very tiny. ʼatlain ʼatnasi, ʼayaa, ʼatudli.átk. Oops. Let me change to adi yikdach. ʼatlain ʼatnasi, ʼayaa,
Stole something big. Raven stole something big. ʻatángi, ʻatnasi, ʻatnasi.
ʼatlain can also mean many.
Car.
I'm thinking ʻatnasi means intestines.
That is true.
Oh, okay.
We're getting close. ʻatlain ʻatnasi, ʻayaa,
I see from inside at the end. And that raven.
Yay.
Raven stole from people, I think.
Okay. That,
No, that's car, not from people.
that raven stole a lot of hot dogs from a person's car. I saw it.
I seen it.
I seen it. Well, okay, there were a bunch of crows. I was sitting there with my daughter. She was very little. She was asleep in the car. And we're in the parking lot of Fred Meyer. It was actually the bed of a pickup truck, but that would get too, this was hard enough. There are all these crows, like messing, and they'd jump in and jump out, jump in, jump out. And then this big raven came and landed. All the crows took off. And when he walked around, his mouth was just wide open. And then it went down and was gone for a little while. And they came back with a big old, looked like Costco-sized hot dog. And then it took off. And it came back and got another one and took off. And I thought, where are you bringing these things? But yeah, it took probably like 10 of them while I was watching. And it was entertaining for me, but I'm sure upsetting for someone at some point.
No, someone was reading their houses.
That's right. Okay, so there's a couple things that I want us to start doing. So we got this chapter about preverbs, and I think getting into it a little bit, let's start here. Can someone, let's just all take turns. If there's a preverb, well, I'll do the first one because there's no preverb, but I would like you to say, for example, if it's your turn, you would say ʼatudli, then you would say ʼayaa. Don't worry about reading the English because we can all read the English. Just say the tlingit out loud so we can hear your voice speaking tlingit. And then we're just going to note this preverb, how it's changing the meaning of this verb over here. Okay, so this is, if we look, this is a list of preverbs, not all of them. A preverb is a word that pops up before the verb, but that changes that verb so much that you cannot separate it. Okay. So I'll do the first one. Yádi. Would someone like to read this and this?
Ḳuwdlig.
Sheesh. Next one.
Yádi.
Sheesh.
Du'ínyati.
Okay.
ʼatángi.
Okay.
Ḳaalḵáawu.
Sheesh.
Ḳuwdliyeeji.
One in the room. Sheesh.
ʼatudli.átk.
Sheesh. One in the room.
ʼatudli.átk.
ʼayaa. ʼatudliyeeji.
Anybody not read yet?
ʼatudliyeeji.
Kataya. Ḥuwdlig.
ʼaduliyeeji. Ḥuwdliyeeji.
Sheesh. Ḥuwdlig. My dog don't listen to me, not obedient. So something that's funny is you can say ʼḤuwdlig. That means I have to pee so bad. so bad. But you have to say ʼḤuwdlig. You can't say ʼḤuwdlig, because that means my pee is going over me. And that just sounds weird. And so keep an eye, like little, every sound counts. Okay. So if we look at this, these are all like very similar or sometimes identical verbs. So if you know how to change yati to uti or to kakwati, or if you know how to change this verb around, now you can say all these different things by changing what's in front of that verb. So you see this is keshye uti. That's not how it is. You could say kesh etine khat uti. I don't need it, right? And so with all of these, they all can work that way, right? Some of them you'll see diti is a little different. But when we start thinking about a preverb, there's sort of like, Tlingit likes to do these things where it says, okay, here's where these things go, and you can have like these sets of them. And this is another one that's like that. So just sort of going through, as you sort of, what we're going to do when we look at chapters like this is we're going to look at all the examples. This is going to give us a list of things. And whenever I put these lists together, like I'm usually not trying to put every single thing in there, but I'm trying to, these are the greatest hits. So when Tlingit puts out an album, like these are the hits. These are the ones you see all the time.
That's what I call it.
That's right. It's a double CD. It's a double, you know, sorry. So when you see de, so like for example, when you say chosaku, I know it. But when someone tells you something, you can say dechsaku, I already know it, right? Dechwaach, I already heard it, right? And so these are things that already happened. De atutu, de yach watusacha, we already ate it all up. All the dry fish is gone. Now, desquetch is a little different, but I haven't quite figured out how to explain the difference between those two. Tatqoyeqa or dechwa. You could also have wayatiyech. Dechwa is probably more common in the interior. Finally, chayesu, just now. Kesh, kesh, hesh, tish, kish, or just the letter L. Are not. Shish is don't. Ade, towards or until. Adach or ach, from or off of. Anach, along, through, via. Kach, very. Kunach, really. So you can have kach kunach, but they should go in that order. Kudach or kutch, too much. Kut, lost or astray. What you'll learn later, and what some of you might already know, is some of these are going to change the conjugation type of a motion verb. If you say kut and there's a motion verb there, it will always be ga conjugation. Ke kut kukwagut, I'm gonna get lost. But you're not gonna get lost, you'll just be right where you're supposed to be. Qunay or qunayeh, it's starting. And then there's a whole list of adverbs, right? There's a whole bunch of them. Kedain, nikdain, chundain. Anybody know any other of these dain adverbs? Shishkadain, gaydain,
Ishandain,
shandain,
Kasayedin.
kasayadain,
Ḳāўdling. Can we say that one?
Nikdain.
nikdain. There's probably a couple others, right? Okay. Yun to completion, which can also be yach in certain situations. In the future, likes to be yende. Kuch, but in the future, likes to be kuchte. Kwakt, dak, mistakenly. Oh, kuch is returning. Dak, out to sea, out in the open, for precipitation to fall, and likes to be dakte. Dak, to the inland, into the shadows, which likes to be in the future, dakte. ʼatudli.átk. We're going to go inland. Ya, low tone, is usually progressive. Most often is progressive, like you say, ya na gut, ya na squeen, ya ana squeen, ya ana squeen, those types of things. K is upwards, ye is downwards, u is to and fro. High tone u is usually thus, and a high tone ye is usually thus. Usually the difference is, like say your name. If you say your name and then the verb, Khone yu khatduwasak. Ye khatduwasak khone. So if that name moves from being right in front of the verb, it switches to ye. Same with yu ye waka, yu yawaka, and ye yawaka. Okay. Chush is to the self, wooch is to each other. Hus pluralizes the third person object or subject or both. Object is the one that the verb happens to. Subject is the one who does the verb. And then dach is either a third person non-human pluralizer or what we call distributive, which I guess I need to add here. It means they all did it, but sort of in different places or in different ways. It's a little complicated, but we'll get to it. Here's a bunch of adverbs. These can just pop up right before a verb. I wrote it down for nothing.
So these go before the verb, not in the adverb spot earlier.
Yes. Well, they can go.
So ʼayaa.
I think they would go right there, yeah. And so this, but because there's a bunch of them, I just made a list of them after this table. Ḳuwdliyeeji, differently. ʼakugeyi, carelessly. ʼanich, for nothing, in vain. ʼayuk, or ʼayak, or ʼayuk, suddenly. And like, that's like something suddenly happened, right? ʼak, long ago. ʼtlinquat, carefully. ʼgadain, greatly. qa, sufficient, acceptable. ʼqunayeeji, differently. ʼishandain, pitifully, poorly, suffering. ʼkashdagenach, slowly. ʼkasayeedain, strangely. ʼkatichdain, crookedly. ʼkayis, for like you could say, ʼbechigi kayis. ʼtleshtasachwacha, I didn't eat anything for 2 days.
A couple further up, could you have like a dialect indicator on some of those?
Oh, yes.
And see where those.
AN is Angun, C is Carcross. Gilchish. Kudzidain, amazingly. Gadain, carefully. Qati, that's probably my favorite one. Nobody knows how. Qati ʼatudli.átk. No one knows how, but we have obtained our language. Ḳuwdlig, incorrectly. ḳuwdlig, it doesn't matter. ḳuwdlig, backwards. ḳuwdlidain, easily. ḳuwdlidain, evilly. ʼayaa, disrespectfully. This has got a spelling here. Okay. ʼagawdain, loudly. ʼniqdain, with intention to harm. ʼshuqanach, at first. ʼshugunach, originally. ʼiqdain, difficultly. ʼqawk, fast. ʼqeshkadain, poorly. ʼkayekadeh, one direction, one type. ʼaqa, inadequate, or I guess adequate, sorry, enough. ʼwayaatiyeeji, sometimes. ʼwushtakadin, in different directions. ʼwushtakan, okay. ʼwushtakan, facing away from each other. ʼwushtayin, facing each other. Ushquniyate, differently. Ḳāndane, angrily. Ḳēqā, truly. Yidat, now. So that's a list of them, and it's just giving you an example of things that you might see. There are certainly more than that. And then my idea is we're going to do two things. We are going to, hold on a second. Can't see the window. So we are going to start going through this story. I did that wrong. Hold on. So we're going to start, there's another story which is being printed right now. And so just like we did the other day, let's do this first one. Can you folks help me translate? And if you give an answer, then pause and let other folks answer. How would I translate "duh"?
There.
There, his, her. Yeah.
This right here.
A low tone hus.
Dale.
For
There.
them all. So this can pluralize the object or the subject or both. And we'll talk about what all that stuff means. This just shows you that there's a hus that's just the letter S. But I put it in here so it counts with all these other husses. Low tone
It's possessive pronoun.
Get away. At. This, okay, there's two different types of at. This is the more common of the two, as a low tone at. Kind of, huh? Something. And this is an object. So let me put this one. It's a relational. This is a relational. This is an object or subject, pluralizer. Away.
It is.
That is, maybe. Ha.
And.
My.
Okay. So we're going to go, we've got a list of, how many more we got? 170 some. So we're going to go through and we just want to make sure that we know all of these words. And then once we get that, then we're going to go through and we're going to look at these verbs. Ibusti, kawati, kuwati. Well, this should be probably yenkati is in front of it. Sati, sati, ti, wuti, wusati, yati, 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 right? And so we're just going to look at these verbs and sort of see which ones we recognize. Some of them might be in forms that are new to us, perhaps. Then we're going to translate this story. ʻatudli.átk has'a'in. And what we're going to do as we translate it, we are going to watch for preverbs, and then we're going to watch for object pronouns, right? And so what we might do is go through and say, that's a preverb. Maybe I can make it this cool green color. And then I could say, that's an object pronoun. Maybe I can make it this cool blue color, right? And I know color coding doesn't work for everybody. And sorry about that, but we will explain it as we go through. And so if I said, ʼatgatuch away, naskinach shah. How would you folks translate that?
Naskinach Shah, is that 3 women?
What about askatuch? Or atkatuch? Sorry. Two
I
is
know tuch is but.
tuch is but.
Is it like something inside them too? Or two?
Atkatuch. Do you know atkatuch?
Forest.
Yeah, so forest. So atkatuch is the forest, or askatuch. But what happens when I put this on there?
In the forest.
In the forest, or at the forest. Waskan keku hasain.
Salmon berries.
Salmon berries.
They picked.
They were picking.
They are picking. It's only 100. There's only 98 more lines to go. We're well on our way. Wait, 97. 97. And so as we go through this, though, we want to just sort of, and if there's any things you have questions about, the way that we're going to start approaching like our kind of dedicated study time is looking at the components of a verb and just saying, okay, that's a lot. That's very abstract. Here's a list of things. But now let's go find some examples. And then we'll just take a look at how those things change. So, like, we'll get to all of this stuff, like what it all means, how it all works, right? Because here's an example. Yak-a is that's good. But there is stuff. This all counts as preverb stuff because it all affects that verb. It's separate words, but once you put to wu yak-a, that's a whole different verb. It means feel good. They feel good about it.
Jikanach. I assume that's not a typo with 2 underlined X's.
That is correct. Because when you have wusati, you're usually going to have an underlined X that marks what the group is. Or what the thing is. What it became. Okay, so that's kind of our work. So what I'd like you folks to do is over the weekend, I want you to make sure that, so I have asked you a couple times now, read this chapter on the preverb, right? Just make sure you read it, make sure you look at this list of things, note any questions you might have, any thoughts you might have. If you like to read, think it. If you like to read stories, if you want to read Duk-Tut, we're also going to look at that. And maybe just look at make a photocopy of it or print a copy of it and just say, I'm just going to look for some preverbs. I would also like you, before Monday, to read this chapter on the object pronoun. What is an object? What the heck? This is the whom. When you say to whom, you're not just trying to be fancy by throwing whom in there. You're using an English object pronoun. The object is the one the verb happens to. Him, her, them. That's why those objects are different than she, he, they. Me is an object. I is a subject. And like grammar's tricky. It is. But once you sort of get it, you will get it. There's a list of object pronouns. When you go through this chapter, you'll see how they change in verbs, and it's all color-coded to help you spot them. And then we'll sort of go through as we read some stories and as we translate them as we go. We'll be looking for object pronouns and preverbs. Any questions?
Cut. Oops.
Did you want the sentence for each
Sure.
Monday?
So 10 sentences as well by Monday. So read these 2 chapters, write your 10 sentences.
Hey, Lance,
Ah,
how do you access this resource with the green preverbs and stuff? Is that on your website under resources?
yeah, that's a great question. So what I like to do is, okay, am I sharing? So I like to go to ʼatudli.átk, usually in the evenings, and under Advanced Tlingit, what I'll do is I'll put a new intro with today's date on it. So for example, this says Yádi 18. So there'll be one that says Yádi 25. It'll summarize the things that we talked about. And then under resources, this is that, it's called the Tlingit Verb Component Handbook. So this is the thing that we're reading through. So if I click on that, it should open and there, and now you can download it, you can save your copy, and we're going through these first 2 chapters, Preverb and Object. There's lots of examples in there. We're going to go through it as a group on Monday. And then we're going to just keep reading stories, listening to your sentences, and then spotting preverbs and objects.
I'm just so glad we went through this preverb section together, because when I first read it, I was going along thinking, wow, these are all fabulous or so descriptive and stuff. And then I got to the adverb section. I thought, what the heck are adverbs? So I was like, oh, okay, it's a little subsection in preverbs, and it goes in this position.
Right.
As far as preference. But boy, was I questioning my logic.
So maybe I need to add a few more things in there. So goodness cheese. Anything else? Questions?
I have a comment. Some of you know Yarovara. She's one of the teachers, and she said, "I never learned so much English grammar as when I was learning Tlingit." So adverbs and object and subject. She said that's where it's like, what's an adverb? You know, that thing.
Yeah, and you know, part of your brain might reject it. Say, I don't need to know this stuff. There's too much stuff. I just want Tlingit as a whole language. But yes, but I think since we don't really have someone we can just move into their home for 6 months and only speak Tlingit and not have any communication with the outside world, I think we kind of have to learn some of this stuff. But like the pace of how it goes, it's okay. We've got time. It's not a super scary thing. We're trying to like just sort of go through one little piece at a time. And then as you go through, like there are certain parts I think that will click faster than others. And I really encourage you all to find study groups together, talk with each other, find other people you can talk to about Tlingit grammar, because it is going to be challenging you for your entire life. But that way when someone, as these elders said these things, right? Like I was in the room when Cyril said these words, and I knew what he said, and I knew why it was so important. Because I know even then, it's like 8 years ago or something, he was one of a handful of people that could still do that stuff. High level Tlingit, and that's what we want to get to, is that high level stuff. And it's going to take a little bit of hill climbing to get there. You go Juan Johan, ikachayin, kunachaya, kunchish.
Cheese.
Sheesh.
Goodness cheese.
Yeah.
Cheese, 2 kosaktin.
Ah.
Goodness cheese.
Cheese.